Did you hear about the very first Small and Supercharged Podcast Live? Now, this podcast will be sandwiched between both of the Podcast Live episodes, and I thought I just wanted to have a little chat about what an incredible event it was and why I did it, how the kind of mechanics of it all worked, and just my kind of worries and concerns about it, but also what I learned from it and everything else. And I think that although I'm going to talk about something quite specific, what I've also realised is from putting this kind of stuff out there into the world, which I do on social media quite regularly, it gives people who are on the cusp of doing something a bit scary or it's pushing their comfort zones just a little bit of kind of reassurance, I guess, that they're not on their own, because I know we can all feel like this. So the idea of the podcast live, I'm not actually quite sure when it came to me or what possessed me, but you know, I have these ideas sometimes, and this was one of them. So the podcast has been going for over a year now. I can't remember what episode this will be, but it's 50 something. So we've done over a year now. I've got a really cool thing coming up in December. We're doing Podmas, which is a short podcast episode from between the 1st and the 24th. So make sure you tune in for that. But it's been incredible. There's been thousands and thousands of downloads, more than I could have possibly hoped for. It's done incredible things. It's created its own little community, and I'm so proud of it. Now, I listen to quite a few different podcasts. I love Jenna Kutcher's. I love Rachel Hollis's Rise podcast, Amy Porterfield, and I also listen to quite a lot of Holly Tucker's Conversations of Inspiration podcasts. She does a podcast, I'm not going to say each week, but it's pretty regularly, and then I think they have breaks. And she interviews an entrepreneur, someone who's really leading the way in business and in their field. And they're really incredible. And what she does also do are these things that she calls the congregation of inspiration, which, I mean, first of all, I love a bit of rhyming. So that ticks all the boxes for me. But I actually heard one when I was driving back from somewhere, and it was with Thomasina Myers. And I'm sure it was a live recording. I've now said this and now I've decided it's not. But it was incredible. And I looked into what the congregation of inspiration was. And I love the fact that it's this event where there's a podcast is kind of the hub of it, but actually there's so much more to it. And I thought that's such a cool idea. And I thought, okay, I'm not at congregation of inspiration level, but I can actually take something from this and create something quite cool, very different, but actually really cool and community based, and it could be really lovely. So I'm incredibly lucky that I work with Victoria Bodey, who is the genius brains, lovely lady, and just such a positive light behind Equiboodle, which if you haven't been and you're in the Cirencester neck of the woods, go. It's just insane. It's the most beautiful tax shop, and she's so lovely, and it's huge. It's a massive tax shop. And I think I mentioned it in kind of passing, and she went, yeah, we can do that here. And I was like, what? She went, no, we can absolutely do that here. We've had events here. We have quite a few events here. If you want to do anything like that here, it's no problem. We can get that sorted for you. So I thought, oh my God, okay, I've got a venue now. And I've got the tech, because this is recorded on, if you want to know, it is a Yeti microphone. I want to say it's a Blue Yeti microphone, but I might have just added the word blue in, and a MacBook Pro. And that's all the kit I actually need to record. So I thought, well, I've got the tech and I've got the venue. It's kind of all I need. Obviously, I'm going to need some guests, but the foundation and the core of what I need to pull this off is there. So I thought, oh Christ, I need to do this. And I thought, well, I wanted to do 2 podcast recordings on the night. And I thought the first one's got to be with Victoria, because I do interview people, either equestrian and country business owners, or equestrian country kind of personalities, or outside people, outside brands, outside thought leaders who've got a lot of stuff they can add value to, and add that into the mix of our industry. So I thought, well, it's got to be Victoria, because her story about Equiboodle is really interesting. This year as you'll have heard, because you'll have heard the first podcast, this year they've brought out their own clothing range. There's loads of stuff to talk about there, which I think people would be really interested in. Perfect. So that's the first one, absolutely done. And then the second one, again, I'm lucky that I've got such amazing ladies and men, but ladies in this case, who tend to just go along with whatever crazy idea I've got, because they know that it's going to be, well, they know it's going to work, she says arrogantly. They know that it's going to work in some format, and it will be a laugh if it goes wrong, it will be a laugh if it goes right, and there will be a gain from it. So I was lucky enough that Sophie Callahan, who, well, you know I love Sophie, it's no lie there, no secret, very, very kindly said that she would come up and do a photo shoot for me, which is amazing. She did one last year. I work with Sophie a lot, and she was really up for coming up. So that was amazing. And we managed to tie it in with she'd be here on podcast day as well. So she was one of my guests on the panel. Another one was Emma Warren, who you know I love and I work with through Hi-Ho. She also has Dimpsey, the beautiful luxury glamping location, and Dimmet, and she's also involved with Blackdown Shepherd Huts, and she was up for it. And Melanie Claryhugh, who is the lady behind, co-founder of Mackenzie and George, she runs it with her lovely husband Chris, said, yeah, she'd be up for it. So I was like, oh my God, okay, excellent. So we've got Victoria for the first one, and then we've got a panel for the second. And you may not have heard that one, but trust me, it's a blinder. So I had the people, I had the location, I had the tech, and then we organised a date, and then we had that. So obviously we sold the tickets. We had quite small numbers because, you know, it's a new thing. And I think with new things, if you test it with a smaller group, it's much easier because you can have, you know, if something fails and doesn't quite work how you want, if it's a smaller group, you can make it up to them in different ways, and you can put different points across. So I was really comfortable with the group. And I have to say, if you're listening to this and you came, you have no idea how much I valued each and every single person that came, each and every single person that booked a ticket. Because when you launch something that you haven't done before and you've got all the nerves going, what if no one comes? You're going to look like an idiot. And what if no one actually cares? And the support I had, even from people that couldn't make it that time, was just off the chart. And it just made me feel like it was going to be fine. I mean, in my head, even if nobody came apart from the people that I was interviewing, that would have been fine, because obviously the podcast goes out into all your ears and you don't see the audience. I mean, there's not an audience here. I'm literally sat in my office, and because we're doing a lot of work on the house, my audience is actually a door. So not a door for the office, a door for the house. So I actually thought, if nobody comes bar the people I'm going to interview, it's still a really good thing to do. And then when the tickets started to sell, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be brilliant. This is going to happen. This is going to work, which was really exciting. So we got some tickets sold, which is brilliant. And we just had it at £5, because I also wanted it to be that if someone comes along for £5, they're going to get a glass of Prosecco and a fun evening, even if the recording doesn't work or something else happens, for a £5. And it was also that £5, if they wanted to, they could redeem it against purchases they made in the store on the evening, because I wanted it to be that it was a no-brainer to come and take a chance on it, which actually was stupid, because I think we had this kind of inbuilt doubts, and I wanted to make sure that even if I let the side down, nobody that came would feel hard done by at all, which is weak, because this is the most arrogant podcast, because I knew I wouldn't let the side down. I knew I would give 110% and I would make it work one way or the other, for the audience at least. If the tech failed and there was an issue with that, I would put in the work and I would make it work. I would redo it. I would do whatever it took. But my concern on the evening was making sure that those people who had paid their money, who had come along on that evening, got a really good evening. So that was my focus. And as we got closer and closer, I kind of thought, oh God, okay, I need to do some stuff for this. So I got some little quote cards printed, which I needed to do anyway, because I run out and I needed to get them done for Hi-Ho & Co. I need to get them done for various other things that I'm working on. So I got those printed. I thought, great, everyone gets a little quote card on their seat. We put something else on the back of the quote card. I did a little print off with tagging everybody if you're watching and everything like that. So I was quite happy with that. I got the Prosecco organised, which I was quite pleased with. We got some gorgeous, delicious brownies and blondies from Coco May, which were very kindly gifted, which the audience loved. And it was just brilliant. So when Sophie actually came up she bless my in-laws, they don't listen to podcasts, but she stayed over at my in-laws, and she's done that before, which was fine. And then we headed over when I picked her up late on the Monday, had some lunch on the way, and we were chatting about it on the way. And she's just such a chilled influence. So I wasn't nervous in the conventional sense, because every aspect of the podcast live I've done before. So I record a podcast for each week. So actually, as I record this, you're my 5th recording of the week because I'm working on Podmas. So I record a podcast every week. That's not a concern. I know how the microphone works. I know how the computer works. I know what to record it on. Not an issue. I know how to speak in front of a group because I've done that with the TEDx talks I've done when I guest lecture. Not a problem. I know how to interview people because I do that every other week for the podcast. So all the elements on their own weren't an issue, but I've never combined them all together. And that was kind of got my angry butterflies whirling around my stomach going, you're going to mess this up, which was lovely. And I thank the butterflies for that vote of confidence. But there was just this thing until I actually had a bit of a word with myself, which I will explain. And I was kind of going, okay, everything on paper is fine, but I feel like I've missed something. Also because it almost felt too easy. You know, the venue is stunning. And I chatted to Victoria and Ginny, who is just, big shout out to Ginny if she's listening. The woman's a legend. They were just so chilled and I'm like, yeah, well, we thought we could do it over here and we'll get the benches out, and it was done. So again, the thing I was kind of thinking, actually I haven't set up for an event before. I usually rock up and it's there. That was something I hadn't done. So I was thinking, well, where are we going to put it? Where's it going to work? And because Ginny and Victoria know the shop so well, they'd already got that in hand. So something that I was concerned about, they were like, no, it's sorted. So that was that. Victoria's so laid back and so chilled about it as well. Sophie's so chilled about it. And I think in some ways, like, don't get me wrong, having people who are relaxed and chilled and just roll with the punches is so useful. Even if you're having a minute to kind of, because you just know it's going to be fine. And you know whatever happens, you're going to be able to fix it. But I was thinking, what have I missed? What have I missed? Turned out I hadn't missed anything. I was just making stuff up. There was something that Victoria said, which was quite funny. When, again, I was kind of thinking, usually when I speak at places, it's not my thing in terms of I'll go, like when I've given my TEDx talks, it's a TEDx event. I just rock up, chat for 15, 18 minutes and I'm done. I don't need to worry about the setup or where the fire exits are or anything like that. And equally when I go and lecture, I'm plonked in a classroom with pupils and I crack on. So I was going, well, do we need to tell people where the fire exits are? This literally was a conversation I had with Victoria, which I'm sure she won't mind me sharing. And she said, darling, where's the fire? And it was so funny because it's just mental, really, that these were the things that I think about. I think I was just trying to make sure that everything was absolutely covered. And it wasn't something we needed to even talk about. But it was really cool. So we got cracking. I tested out the microphone and it was really left me. The first time I tested it, it wasn't good. The sound was not a good sound. I thought, this isn't great. And actually, if you have one of these microphones, there are 4 different settings, which is useful. And they're not labelled like single, double, whatever. There's weird little symbols. So I got my phone out and actually found out what the symbols meant. So that was good. I had done the research before, but I got the sideways 8 and the flat 8 confused. This is literally what's on the on the microphone. So that was fine. And I tested again. And it was much, much better. So that was really good. And then we just got on with it. So I think we were really lucky that, obviously I was mega, mega lucky. And I'm so, so grateful for Victoria for letting us use her shop. For Ginny, who was a complete diamond by filling up Prosecco, chopping up brownies, clearing up all the carnage. Just amazing. Victoria was just insanely good to interview on both of the podcasts. And obviously being allowed access to someone's shop like that, which was just kind of a do what you want, it'll be fine, we'll make it happen, was just incredible. And I'm so, so, so grateful for her allowing me to do that. And then the next podcast where we had 4 ladies and myself. So I was asking the questions, but we had Melanie, who was sat to the right of me, and then Victoria, then Emma, then Sophie. And I was thinking, I'm not sure the microphone's going to handle this because it's quite a big, again, if you are me and you want it to be perfect, or as close to perfect as possible. When you're interviewing one person, it's much easier because that's your only concern. You're only worried about their sound getting to the microphone. When you're interviewing 4 people that are kind of spread out in an arc, you want to make sure that the microphone has got the best chance of picking up all of the sounds, all of the voices when they're talking. And we also had a question and answer bit that I was going, oh, well, I'm going to have to repeat the questions because the microphone isn't going to be able to pick it up. And actually, I don't believe that's the case from listening back to some of the audio already. It was actually fine. So it gives me a lot more confidence moving forward. But again, I have never done a question and answer in a big room with one microphone. You know, this isn't a high-tech setup that I record the podcast on. I've done a lot of research into it. I've got the right stuff. I've got the right programs running. But it was basically me, a microphone and the computer, and my own knowledge and my own intelligence and knowledge of the way it works. So I didn't have a sound team or any of the things that you would, that I imagine people have. And it's literally me going, okay, well, this is how it works at home. Let me see what that does. Okay, let's crack on with this. It's going to be fine. And it really, really was. It was the most amazing evening. Victoria's individual podcast was incredible. Then we had a bit of a leg stretch, and then we sat down for the second podcast, which had the 4 people, which you're going to hear very soon if you haven't heard it already. No, it's definitely, this is going out in the middle of them, so you will hear this next week. It is so good. And it was brilliant, and it did divert in a way I didn't quite expect. But that's kind of what I like with podcasts. When I record them, I'm not really structured on the questions because I have a theme, I have an idea, and some people like a much more detailed question list. But personally, when I'm speaking to somebody, just generally in life, I don't have a list of questions I'm going to ask them. I maybe have something I want to ask them to generate that information. But I want to know, when I'm interviewing people, I want to know what they want to talk about, what do they want to share? Because actually, I'm going to get much more out of them that way, and they're going to feel much happier and more satisfied, and you as the listener are going to get much better experience if people are talking about stuff they're passionate about and they care about, than me kind of going, well, I know you wanted to talk about that, but actually I want to talk about this. And that's not the way the conversation's going. So to me, I usually have a theme and I have a few pointers. So, which you'll have heard last week with Victoria. So I did have a few pointers that I wanted to cover. But between those pointers, I know people that write out scripts for podcasts. I maybe had 5 bullet points that I wanted to make sure that we touched on. But between those, it's a free-for-all, which I love. So that was really good. And I'm so chuffed with the podcast. And also the audience questions were insane. Like, they were so, so good. I loved, with capital letters, how involved the audience were in the podcast. And it's given me a really strong idea, I think, for the next podcast live, because there is going to be one. Victoria has said to me whenever. So we're doing another one, and I'm going to have 2, I think I've got 2 speakers, or 2 interviewees. I've definitely got 1, possibly 2, and also a way to make it much more engaged with the audience, because the microphone doesn't struggle, which means that I'm cool with it, but actually getting that involvement. And I'm really, really excited about it. So the point of this was, obviously I wanted to talk to you about how it all worked, because again, it wasn't like it was a high-tech production. It wasn't. It never is. If you've seen from my Instagram, you'll know I'm writing a book all about marketing on a shoestring, and everything I do is on that shoestring, because I like to make things work harder, and I like to see what I can do in a different canny way. So everything I do kind of follows that quite closely. But also I wanted to share that the nerves and stuff, if I'd have let the crazy butterflies take over, I wouldn't have done it. And the way that when they were getting really lively, especially when I did that first sound test and it was awful, like the noise was just too much. I was like, well, this is great. The microphone's not going to work. The way I overcame that, and this is what I did with my first TEDx talk, I didn't really seem that bothered on the second. Probably because just before I went on stage, I managed to disconnect all the microphones by itching I itched my ear and then ripped a microphone off. It was quite a special moment. But the way I did it was, when something is really stressful, I'm not sure, there's probably some really clever term for this, or I start to think, what am I doing? This isn't going to work. This is going to be a disaster. I think, okay, what if it is a disaster? What does that actually mean? Now, if a disaster means that your house burns down and everyone that you love is no longer here, like that's really rough. That's awful. But most of the time, and definitely with these kind of things, a disaster means you look a bit of a fool. Well, I'll run with that. So if something doesn't work, it might mean that the audio isn't the good quality I want it to be. Well, okay, but it's a podcast live, so people know it isn't going to be exactly the same as normal, and that's fine. And it will be explained it's a live podcast recording, and that's okay. And also, if it's really rubbish, I'll redo it via Zoom. It's not a biggie. It's not a big problem. I can make this work. And I know the people who I've got on board will help me make it work. If the sound isn't great or I'm having a technical issue, that doesn't mean the audience can't have a really good time. They were my priority. If the recording doesn't work and I have to do it again, it's not a problem. It doesn't mean that my car's going to burst into flames or my house is going to burn down or I'm not going to have a job or anything, or my family, are going to be ill or in danger. So actually the stuff that really matters, that's completely the wrong priority order. I did this the other day. Basically, I thought, if something goes wrong, what do I want to do? I want to go home to see my family. And I need the car to do that, and they're in the house. But they're the priority, you know what I mean? And actually, none of the stuff that I need to get to what I want to do, as in to go home and see my family, they're not going to be affected. They don't care. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. My children don't care whether I am Gary V or whatever, as long as I'm hanging around with them, watching television, usually cooking them food, giving them hugs. They don't care. And actually, it's a really good leveler because you kind of think, well, actually, if the stuff that really, really matters isn't affected by the things I'm trying to do, it can give you a real confidence boost to try them because it isn't compromising the key values for you. It isn't compromising the stuff that your why, the reason you do what you do. And I think if you can have that knowledge, it can be the biggest confidence boost. And also the biggest thing to egg you on and go on, you can do it, because it doesn't matter if you cock it up. And having that to me is a big game changer. And I've used it, the first TEDx talk when I was really getting quite stressed in my little mind, I thought it doesn't matter. Even if I walk on that stage and I cannot string a sentence together anymore, it doesn't matter. I'll look a bit of an idiot. Well, I can run with that. I've been involved with horses for long enough. They make you look an idiot even when you're trying not to be. And actually, because I knew that, I instantly, everything you kind of go, actually, it's got nothing to lose. And it just, for me, it calms the butterflies, it just resets everything, and you can crack on. And I use exactly the same thing don't get me wrong, the podcast nerves versus the TEDx nerves weren't even on the same on the same level. But I think that's because I've done so much more since I did my first TEDx talk. I did my TEDx talk because I told myself I wasn't a very good public speaker. And I thought, what's the best way to address that? I know, I'll go and give a TEDx talk. This is literally, I've got the butterflies there, but I've also got the devil in my head going, you should really push yourself on this. You should show them. And the butterflies going, oh. So I do these kind of crazy things every now and then. It's fine. It's all good. But obviously since then I've done another TEDx talk. I've done a lot more lecturing. I've done a lot more speaking. So the nerves from that point of view weren't really an issue. So it was a very different kind of thing. But I think if you can find a way, and if you're struggling with something now and if you're worried about something, I'm not a counsellor, a therapist, a psychologist. I don't know that this is going to work for everybody, but I can tell you it works for me. I just have a minute and think, okay, so worst case scenario, what's going to happen? So again, thinking about something I'm doing now, so the book I'm writing, you start writing it and it's like 50,000, 60,000 words. So it's significant. And you start writing it and you start getting quite excited. And then you think, what if no one reads it? It's going to be a disaster. And then you actually have a word with yourself and you go, if no one reads it, it's not a disaster. I've wasted time. And I can repurpose what I've written in other ways, and I can make, and it's very therapeutic getting all your knowledge out there, even if it's written, so you can then do something else. But, you know, the nerves about, well, what if it's a flop? What if it is a flop? It's not my only source of income. It's not going to affect my house, my family, the family in the house, I meant. The horses, anything like that. It's not going to affect it. So my ego will take a battering. I can run with that. Half the things I do, I'm always on the cusp of my ego taking a battering. And actually, I don't really have that big an ego, as in it's used to getting a battering because not everything I do works. And I think we've come to an agreement that sometimes it goes well and sometimes it doesn't. So I might get that. But apart from that, what have I got to lose? Nothing. I'm going to waste a bit of time. I can repurpose that. So actually I've got, if it flops, I've got blogs forever. So, you know, we're good. But what if it doesn't? What if it succeeds? And this is the thing with the podcast. What if it went well? What if people loved it? What if people took pictures? What if it helped somebody? What if people love being able to chat and the sense of community and meeting other people that are in their same shoes? And they blooming well did. And the feedback I have had, not just from the thing that we did, not just from the podcast, not just from the recording, and hopefully not just from the podcast when they come out, but the feedback from the people who were there, who got the chance to speak to people and ask them questions and feel not alone, kicks the backside of any concern I can have. And I love that. And with the book, what if it succeeds? What if it does become a #1 bestseller? I mean, that would be insane. But what if it does? What if it helps people to build their own personal brands and businesses in an incredible way that doesn't cost them any money and that allows them to make money that they can then invest in what they want to do, whether that is marketing or whatever, but they've got that foundation to know that they can pursue their dreams without having to have a massive bank balance waiting to go. How cool would that be if it succeeded? So that is my thing to you today. When you're having your doubts, think about what the worst case scenario is and what the best case scenario is. And if the podcast has taught me anything, it's to just push yourself. It's going to be fine. Unless it's like a life-threatening bungee jumping without a bungee cord attached. Don't do that. That's just straight up mental. You know what I mean. You've absolutely got this. If you've listened to and you've enjoyed this podcast, I would love you if you take a screenshot and share it on your stories. Tag me at Ria Freeman PR. And obviously, when you listen to the podcast next week, make sure you tag those ladies too, because I am very, very grateful that they put themselves out there, trusted the madness, and delivered an absolutely insanely good podcast. Thank you so, so much for listening. If you want to make sure you never miss an episode, get subscribing. Nip over to iTunes, get subscribing, and it would be amazing if you could leave a review. They really, really help get people to listen to the podcast, and that's all I want from this. So thanks so, so much, and we will catch up. Well, next week you've got a belter, and we'll catch up one-to-one in a couple of weeks' time. Take care and speak soon.